Hi there, thanks for watching. This is our video recording of our normal audio podcast. So you'll be seeing us talking to each other, not so much looking at the camera, and we live stream this Sunday nights and Wednesday nights. Go to oncepodcast.com to learn more about the podcast, how to subscribe, our live schedule, and more. But what you're about to see is the recording of our normal audio podcast. So subscribe, download automatically episodes every week, 2 times a week, now that the show is back over at oncepodcast.com/live. And we are ready to go. Let me just tweet just one more time to make sure. Okay, 3. As soon as this alarm stops, or siren outside.
I think you should remind people they need to refresh if they want to see the video.
They don't need to refresh.
Oh.
But why should I tell them? They wouldn't hear. Anyway.
Some of the people in the chat room were saying it was audio only.
Huh. Okay, here we go. I'll just start a new recording on my recorder in 3, 2, 1. You're listening to Once, episode 230, Souls of the Departed, Initial Reactions. Welcome back to another episode of Once, the unofficial podcast for ABC's TV show Once Upon a Time. And welcome back to Once Upon a Time. I'm Daniel J. Lewis.
And I'm Jenny.
And Jeremy is out traveling right now, so he's taking a little break from the podcast for a couple weeks. And we have some fun conversation for you in the meantime. It's exciting to have Once Upon a Time back. And we had access to this episode for a couple weeks before the episode aired publicly. But I didn't watch it. Jenny didn't watch it, but Hunter and Jacqueline and Matthew Paul from our whole team on Once Podcast have watched it before this, and they gave it 7 out of 10 and then said they'd probably upgrade that rating after rewatching it. I would give this episode maybe a 7 out of 10 as well, and I might upgrade that more after rewatching it as well. What do you think, Jenny?
You know, I think I'd give it a 7 out of 10 as well. I'm not going to rewatch it, though.
There was a lot in this that was pulling all the emotions out, as well as moments that I felt like cheering because we got to see certain characters again, like Neil and Peter Pan, and Cruella was hinted at.
Yep.
We saw her car. We didn't see Cruella. Cora, one of my favorite villains. Cora and Peter Pan are my 2 favorite villains from Once Upon a Time.
Yeah, it was definitely awesome seeing a lot of old characters again.
And I'm sure we'll get to see more as well, knowing that it's very likely anyone who's down here that's a villain has unfinished business. Well, they're here because they have unfinished business. So that's what they were saying. But I'm saying that any villain that's down here is most likely one we're already familiar with. Oh, the Blind Witch as well.
Oh, I loved seeing her again. She was one of my favorites.
I wanted her to say gravy.
Gravy or
butter.
Butter. Yep. I was wondering if Graham was going to be down there.
Yeah, that's a good question. Does he have unfinished business? That's the thing. So here's, for clarification, the underworld we now know is not hell. It's not heaven. It's this limbo place. And then when people are in here, they have the ability to go to either place. Now, the writers are being very careful to try to be, I think, religiously neutral. They're not saying heaven. They're not saying hell.
And they're not saying purgatory.
Yeah. They're just saying underworld, limbo, a better place and a worse place.
Yeah.
So we may use the terms heaven and hell just because that's what we're thinking.
That's because that's what it looks like. That's what it reminds us of.
Yeah. But I know that they're not saying that. So that little disclaimer out of the way, we can then have our conversations and use whatever word works best in our minds for describing instead of saying someplace better or someplace worse. So the underworld is apparently too dangerous, and we didn't discover why until the end of this episode.
Yep, I was confused about that as well.
So that's Hades, which I think they picked a great actor to play him. And
yeah. He had the long face. He just looked like Hades. Even before his hair started, doing the fire thing. It's like, he could look a lot like Hades if they wanted him to.
It's not quite James Wood, but Greg German is his name. He does play the part very well.
He does. He's nice. He's cool. I wonder if we'll see the temper come out. Hades has a temper.
Oh, yeah. I think we were seeing a little bit of something with that whole blue fire on his head.
Yeah, but in the movie Hercules, he kind of explodes. Yeah. And his hair becomes like fire, and his shoulders are burning, and I wonder if we'll actually see like a temper tantrum.
I was prepared to think that Korra was going to be the villain of this season. But then it seems like she was merely an agent for Hades.
Yeah. Yeah, like he's using everybody down there. When I first saw Korra, my first thought was actually, now she has her heart back. Is she going to be different? Because remember, she was given her heart back.
And then died.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think she is different in that she couldn't tell Regina why Regina should not stay and why it was too dangerous. But at the same time, she really wanted to protect Regina, and that's her biggest interest. And she had some odd ways of going about it, including giving Henry the chance to leave. That was kind of weird. I need to rewatch that to understand a little bit better how that works out. It seems like that fire then determines whether the person is good or bad and whether they get to go to a better place or a worse place.
Yeah, they have to walk through the fire.
So Korra didn't really do a bad thing.
I can't decide whether she did or not, because either way it would have been bad.
Yeah.
Because if Regina had left, that would have been selfish. And if Regina had stayed, then her husband would have had to go through the fire.
Right.
So, I mean, but it ended up good because Regina chose to stay and he went to a higher place, a better place, however you want to say it.
A place that was beautiful.
A place where people are happy.
Now, the thing about Henry Sr. reminds me that we got to see tiny Henry Sr.
Yeah.
And for a little while, when I was seeing the flashbacks, I was thinking, oh no, please, not more of Regina after Snow White. I feel like we've seen enough of that.
Speaking of Snow White and weirdness, that scene with Jiminy and like when when the queen was squeezing the heart and Snow White looked like she was right, that was super weird.
Yeah, kind of just weird. But hey, we got to see Jiminy Cricket.
Yeah.
A mute Jiminy
There he
Cricket.
was.
But seeing tiny Henry now, I think, legitimizes the flashbacks to me a little bit.
Really?
Because remember, back in season 1, Regina went to Wonderland to get her father, who was in this little box, she gave him the mushroom to make him big again. And she said that the Queen of Hearts had taken Henry for leverage against Regina.
Huh.
And we'd always wondered, how did Henry get there?
I'm going to be honest, I completely forgot.
And we had theorized certain things, like maybe Korra had some way of getting back to the Enchanted Forest and then stealing Henry and then going back to Wonderland.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened. But this episode also has some of the creepiest things in it, like that mirror grabbing Regina and pulling her in.
Nicely done. It even had fingers.
It reminds me a little bit of the one and only horror movie I've watched, I think. Poltergeist, the original Poltergeist.
Oh, I haven't
There
seen
was
that.
Something kind of similar in concept to that.
Oh.
And some of the other stuff, like the zombie-looking Hook, was
he looked
weird.
beat up. I love the detail of their trying to shield that view from Henry. I love that detail.
Yeah.
Guess they didn't want him to have nightmares or something. And I really loved that Henry Jr. got to meet Henry Sr.
That was neat.
That was very neat.
Special moment. Despite being in the underworld, there were plenty of special moments in this episode.
Yeah. So what's their mission now? Are they going to try and give everybody in the underworld a happy ending?
I think so, or help them to move on. But the thing is, are you really doing someone a favor if by helping them move on and finish their unfinished business, they're going to someplace worse?
Yeah. I'm confused about that as well.
Or do they have in mind to take everyone out of the underworld and back to Storybrooke?
I don't know. I thought Regina was more, thinking along the lines of helping people cross the bridge between, kind of a purgatory to kind of a heaven. I think that's what she had in mind.
And that's what Hades seems to not want to happen at all.
What does he gain? I want them to tell us, what does he gain from having people in his purgatory?
I think he just loves power, and he loves having control over people. And if everyone is gone, then he has no control. He has no power. No one to do his bidding.
No one to do his nails.
His toenails.
His toenails, yeah.
And there are plenty of mythologies that go along with Hades and what he wants and his roles, responsibilities, and that kind of thing. And Jacqueline will probably bring a lot of insight to that in our upcoming full discussion, because filling in for Jeremy, Jacqueline will be joining us on Wednesday. That will be Wednesday, March. Let me just look this up so I can say this. Edit point. On Wednesday, March 9th at 8 p.m. Do we do it at 8? Yes. No. I'll just say it this way. On Wednesday, March 9th, go to oncepodcast.com/live to check that out and see our schedule for all of our live episodes, as well as join us for the live shows and our live chat rooms. Now that Once Upon a Time is back, it's a lot of fun to hang out in the chat room during the live airing of Once Upon a Time in Eastern and Central Time, because we can chat about things, we can clarify things with each other. We
can laugh at things.
Yeah. And comment on how ridiculous certain things are. But hey, you know what? Speaking of ridiculous, you know what's not ridiculous?
What?
Our heroes. Our heroes help this podcast to go to a better place. Our heroes for this episode that I would love to thank. I am honored to thank these heroes because they help us bridge the gap between no podcast and a beautiful podcast.
Yeah.
So thank you. In this episode, thanks to Lisa Slack, David Newland, DJ Firewolf, Tappenbird, and our 27 heroes on Patreon. Thank you very much for your kind support. We could not do this podcast without you. Really, we seriously couldn't. If we didn't have you supporting the podcast, we might have stopped a long time ago. So thank you very much for supporting. And if you aren't supporting the podcast yet, but you would like to, then please go to oncepodcast.com/hero and sign up there to be a regular contributor. It can be a contribution of any amount on a regular basis.
2 cents?
And we would be very grateful.
You could toss in your 2 cents.
We would hope it would be more than 2 cents, but do whatever you're able to do. And there are certain fees that are deducted from that, so we get a portion of whatever is given. So I would recommend a little bit more than 2 cents, but it could be as little as $1 a month. That's like less than a quarter per episode of Once Upon a Time. That's like less than a quarter per episode of Once Podcast that we're giving you for free. So please, if you'd like to be a hero to the podcast and help us finish our unfinished business, then please go to oncepodcast.com/hero.
Daniel, you're the king of segues.
And speaking of segues, let's go back into Once Upon a Time. I think that this episode also legitimized something else we've seen in the past. And Jeremy would be thrilled at this.
Oh.
Because back when...
I'll try and be thrilled for Jeremy.
For Jeremy. Back earlier in this season, we had the episode of Once Upon a Time. You know what? Hold on. I need the name of that episode. So this is another edit point. What was the name of that episode? The one with Merida. I can't remember the names of the episodes as well as I used to.
Wasn't it Brave or something like that?
No. The Bear King. That's it. Okay. Let me just say this again. Not only did this episode legitimize, let me say that differently. I think this episode legitimizes some other things as well, including one of the kind of filler episodes of Once Upon a Time, The Bear King. That was the one where we saw Merida and Arthur and Zelina, and Merida then used this ale to talk to her dead father.
Oh, yeah.
And we had said, and Jeremy would be thrilled to know that this now is legitimized by this episode. We'd said back then, we hope that ale comes into play again in the future because that seems like something very useful and valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, that's the same ale that they used here to be able to communicate with Henry Sr.
Yay! I'm so excited that the ale was used again. Yay, yay.
Or,
yay.
Yeah, she's trying to channel Jeremy's enthusiasm at the moment. And this also was the same ale that they used to try and communicate with Hook. But where was Hook?
I don't know. Wherever he was is bad.
This whole thing about the graveyard and communicating, this is one of the things I also need to understand better when we rewatch this, because I couldn't quite understand, where are these people? Are they just sleeping in their graves and you wake them up? Or what was that? Or is it like there are multiple underworlds and you can communicate with different ones? It was all weird.
I wonder if it has anything to do with like the rivers, like the different multicolored rivers coming from Hades' chair.
That could be. Yeah, there could be some connection there that each of those rivers goes to a different underworld or different dimension of some sort.
Sorry, my enthusiasm was a little bit too much for some of the people in the chat room. Sorry.
I think that I just lost my train of thought.
We were talking about rivers and Hades.
Yeah. Edit point. Which I don't have to say because I marked them.
Where is Hook?
Okay. It was really cool to see that the underworld is a different version of Storybrooke.
Yeah.
Now that makes it easy for them because it means they continue to film in Steveston.
Yeah, and they don't have to change their sets much.
Right. But it's really cool for us, I think, because it looked like a slightly post-apocalyptic version of Storybrooke.
Yeah, it does.
Or many people, I know in the chat room while we were watching live, pointed out that it's very reminiscent of Planet of the Apes, where there's the Statue of Liberty that's fallen down. And there's this strange connection then between the underworld and the Dark Curse. And for a while, we thought that Rumpel created the Dark Curse. But he wasn't the one that created it. He merely put the pieces together. He got that recipe, remember, from the creature under the mountain. The Chernabog was guarding it, and he had the Queens of Darkness get the recipe for him. So he didn't create the curse himself. He discovered it. I'm now wondering if maybe Hades created that dark curse. That would probably make sense. So which came first? Storybrooke or the underworld?
I don't know.
I would have to think that the underworld came first because it doesn't seem like enacting the dark curse suddenly made the underworld look like the town that the dark curse created. But then why make the underworld look like a modern town?
I don't know.
I know we can start overthinking this, and I'm bridging on that gap, carefully walking across the pit of hell to possibly something greater. But we'll not try to dig too deeply there because sometimes when we think too hard, we discover way too many problems.
You know what I was thinking when they were walking around saying, "Where is Hook? Where is he? Where is he?" I was thinking, well, where is he usually in Storybrooke?
At the sea?
Yeah, he's usually
On the docks?
at the docks, in his boat, or in a tavern, or he's with Emma. Yeah.
I wonder who else we're going to see down here. And I don't know the spoilers. I know Jacqueline and Hunter do the spoilers segment, and you'll hear from them in our full discussion episode later this week. But with seeing these villains that we've seen or that have been hinted at, I wonder how much more are we going to see of them?
Mm-hmm.
Like, will Cora be in future episodes, or was Cora being turned back into the Miller's daughter kind of the
send off?
Yeah, send off for her. Now go on to Forgotten Character Island in the underworld. And maybe the same thing with Peter Pan, that his purpose was just to get that ale for Rumpel.
No, I think Peter Pan's in this for a little while longer. The only thing that bothers me about Peter Pan is he's not an old guy. Because when he died, he was an old guy.
Yeah.
Which is weird. Maybe he made a deal with Hades to get his youth back. I have no idea. But I think he'll be causing trouble in the future for the heroes who are trying to help everybody down there.
I expect to see Cruella in person, not just her car, because they hinted at, hey, look, Cruella's here.
Mm-hmm.
And Emma was the one that sent Cruella to the underworld by killing Cruella.
Yeah.
So I imagine that to be a problem point for Emma. And so what's going to happen with these villains that are there? Are they going to get to go to a better place? Are they going to get back to our world? Or are they going to be sent to a worse place? Or will the whole of the underworld be destroyed in some strange way?
I just don't know.
These and many more questions may never be answered, but we're in this for the story and in this to see what kind of stuff is coming. And certainly we hope that you continue to join us for this fun ride of story, of intrigue, of mystery, of myth, of legend. A lot more is coming in Once Upon a Time, I'm sure of it. And this, by the way, was the 100th episode of Once Upon a Time.
Wow.
So big congratulations to Once Upon a Time. They had a special celebration and a special viewing of this episode, and they celebrated with cake, and most of the cast were able to make it. So congratulations. Happy birthday, Once Upon a Time.
Happy 100th birthday.
And to celebrate 100th birthday, in case you haven't heard yet, Once Upon a Time has been renewed for a 6th season. Some people might not like that. Some people would be thrilled with that. But what I'm hoping is that this gives them the chance to tell the full story they want to tell. And we don't know how much of a story the writers have had in mind from the beginning. I was theorizing that season 5 would be the final season of Once Upon a Time. And we don't know how long of a season 6 will be. It could be that maybe it's only a half season. It could be a full season. But the thing is that this will give the authors the chance to complete this story arc and potentially bring Once Upon a Time to a complete close with the 6th season. I'm not saying I want it to end, but I do want them to know when it will end, because knowing how many episodes they'll have left really helps the story development so that they can take advantage of all the time they had. We saw with Lost, a TV show often brought up with Once Upon a Time, because some of the writers from Lost helped create Once Upon a Time, Adam Horowitz and Eddie Kitsis. And with Lost, when they knew the end date for Lost, they knew exactly how many episodes they would need to write. They knew what story they could include, what they couldn't, and it really helped them develop the story better. So I hope that whatever the case, however many new episodes Once Upon a Time will get in the 6th season, that it will be good for Once Upon a Time, that the authors and the whole writing team will know how to fit their story into whatever amount of episodes we have left. But congratulations to Once Upon a Time for a 6th season. Our other sister TV show that we have a podcast about, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., was also renewed for another season. And if you watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., then please go over to welcometolevel7.com. That's our podcast that's not hosted by us. That's hosted on our network, but some of our other friends host that podcast talking about Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Agent Carter, and the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe. So if you like anything Marvel, definitely go check out that other podcast over at welcometolevel7.com. We'd love your feedback for this episode of Once Upon a Time, as we'll be incorporating your feedback into our upcoming full discussion and trying to figure out what's going on, understand some of these things better, look for Easter eggs. So if you noticed something, if you have a theory about something, if something really stood out to you as, whoa, this ties in with this other thing and this other thing, and it all makes sense now, please send us that great feedback. Our contact information is on the website at oncepodcast.com/contact, or you can email us directly, feedback@oncepodcast.com. Please connect with us on Twitter @oncepodcast, and I'm Daniel J. Lewis on Twitter @TheRamenNoodle.
And I'm Jenny, and you can follow me at twitter.com/Jenny's Nook.
Please share this episode with all of your friends. It's at oncepodcast.com/230. That's the best way you can support the podcast. Even if you can't contribute monetarily, sharing the podcast with others helps the podcast to grow. And until next time, the underworld that is not the quote I wanted. This will be fixed in post. Once Podcast is a proud member of Noodle.mx Network. Find more of our award-winning and award-nominated podcasts to make you think, laugh, and succeed at Noodle.mx. Big thanks to our heroes for supporting the podcast. If you would like to be one of them and keep the podcast going to better places, then please go to oncepodcast.com/hero. And thank you for your support. This is the quotation I wanted. And remember, if we were dreaming, we'd be talking about donuts or something. And thanks for listening.
I thought he said there'd be talking donuts or something.
I think he said we'd be talking donuts or something.
Sounds more funny if you say there'd be talking donuts.
What did he say? Did I get that right, chat room? There's a 30-second delay, so I have to wait for them to respond. There would be talking donuts. Okay. That's what Ashley thought. Record both, double check. Well, I have to publish this before I can double check. And I won't be able to double check until tomorrow when our episode downloads. The TV show episode. It was Neil near the beginning.
I thought this season was going to be the last season.
Yeah, I thought it was. I never said that officially.
Yeah, I was kind of actually hoping it would be the last season.
But I kind of didn't want them to end with the underworld. I wanted them to end with a different story arc. So I'm glad that
everybody gets back to the Enchanted Forest.
Right. Or maybe not necessarily that, but that it would be a better story arc than this as the series ending. Like something even more epic. Something with a bigger happy ending. Something that ties back into hope even more. Something that gets us just really excited about the ending, about what's happening, about things that are being brought to a close. And I don't think the underworld is the story to do that. And since it's not going to be the last season, I'm thankful that it won't be the underworld story arc that has to end the series. They can end the series with something else. And John, please include that in our discussion about season 6, because I thought Jenny brought up a great point there. There would be talking donuts. Okay, so I'm doing the closing again. And until next time, remember, if we were dreaming, there'd be talking donuts or something. And thanks for listening. Okay. Oh, and John is here.
Hi, John.
Okay, recording is officially finished. So don't say anything of value.
Actually, I think we just finished recording.
Yeah. Well, he's 30 seconds behind.
Oh.
So That's why he said that. But I am uploading the file now.
It's coming your way, John.
I added it up recently and I realized I've hosted almost 1,000 podcast episodes.
Just on this show. On this show.
No, on all of the podcasts I've done.
Oh, wow.
Like the Ramen Noodle, Once podcast, and the Audacity to podcast alone account for over 800 episodes, I think. But then there are plenty of other episodes that aren't as easy to count. Like for Are You Just Watching, I think I hosted 35 episodes there. And I've done plenty of video episodes that I have no easy way of counting.
Pretty impressive.
Like videos from CES and stuff.
Good night, Ashley.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. Feel free to hang out in the chat room, but please remember no spoilers in this chat room. You might, the next time you visit the live page, you might see something a little bit different. Something that might make the page a little bit easier. The chat room might be squashed a little bit more, but that's okay because most of the comments people make are short comments anyway. So there's a lot of wasted space on the right side. I'm not saying suddenly start writing long books in the chat room, but I'll be changing some things maybe on the site in the coming week. And one of the things I might be implementing is that there will be a separate chat room for spoilers, if you want to talk spoilers over there. But thank you very much for joining us, and we'll be back on Wednesday. It will be at least...
I won't be back.
Yeah, I'll be back, and Jacqueline will be there. Jeremy won't be because he's still traveling. Erin won't be there because of her work schedule. So it will be at least Jacqueline and me. Maybe Hunter will be there too. But it'll be a good conversation, especially having Jacqueline on because I'd love to get her insight with the Greek mythology that she knows.
Fun.
Yeah. So that'll be lots of fun. And I am looking for the window where I go to stop the live stream. Oh, there it is. That's why we're still talking. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. Subscribe at oncepodcast.com if you're not already. And bye.